Alright, we seem to get a new Robin Hood movie every couple of years now, but the one that I always go back to is the Disney animated version, and that's what I grew up on. I loved it. I always loved it. But my opinion of it has kind of changed over the years as I've grown, because I started to notice that there's two different messages being put forth in here that are not quite synced up properly. And I mean, let's just break them down real quick here, and then we'll jump in and look at a couple scenes that illustrate this clearly. The story, the plot of the movie itself is focused on reclaiming stolen money from Prince John and giving it back to the victims. Now, generally, I could get behind an idea like that. There's a video game I used to play years ago called The Elder Scrolls 4, and in there was a little side quest where you could break into a tax collector's office and take the money that he had just collected, along with a list of the victims and the amounts that were taken from each one. I think that was an important element, because that way, you can be sure that you're just returning the right amounts to the victims as proportionate to how they were robbed. And you're not just using that as a shield, as like a moral shield to rationalize and justify your own theft. Which is what Robin Hood is doing. These two scenes that we're going to look at in a moment here, they very clearly express that Robin is all about robbing the rich to give to the poor. It's not about reclaiming stolen funds from a thief. That just happens to be what he did this one time that the movie's focusing on, but he's generally a lot less discriminating than that. Let's have a look here at a couple of scenes that very clearly explain what's going on here.
You know something, Robin, I was just wondering. Are we good guys or bad guys? Are robbing the rich to feed the poor?
Rob? That's a naughty word. We never rob. We just sort of borrow a bit from those who can afford it.
Borrow? Boy, are we in debt.
Well, even though Prince John offered a huge reward for the capture of Robin Hood, that elusive rogue kept right on robbing the rich to feed the poor. And believe me, it's a good thing he did.
Alright, so the movie is very clearly telling us that robbing from the rich to give to the poor is a good thing. It's a good thing he was doing that, because they're so poor, they were just, robbed by the tax collectors, and they're down on their luck, and oh, it's even raining out, and everyone's so miserable, and it tugs on your heartstrings and tries to leverage compassion and empathy and that sort of thing to sell this concept to you. And it's funny because in this first scene, they even brought up the fact that Robin doesn't even want to admit what it is. I mean, Little John asks, are we good guys or bad guys for robbing the rich to give to the poor? And rather than saying yes or no, Robin dodges the question entirely and says, no, we're not even robbing. We never rob. We just borrow a bit from those who could afford it. Well, I mean, I think we all know what borrowing is, and theft and borrowing are two very different things, and Robin Hood is not exactly known for returning what he stole to his victims, definitely not with interest. He's clearly just using some nonsensical language to try to cover up his deeds because he's guilty. He knows what he's doing. He's just trying to avoid the reality of it by dressing it up in nonsense language. It's kind of awkward because they've got these different messages that they're trying to wedge through, because they know, like, especially back then, this was decades ago, audiences were not so sympathetic to socialism at that time. They could smell it a mile away, so Disney knew they really had to dress it up. They did a great job of it. I mean, they have these adorable foxes, playing the roles, and they're, animals in the forest. They're all happy and playing music and celebrating, and they make them lovable. They dress them up as folk heroes. But theft is theft. And call me rigid, but principles should hold up no matter who they're applied to. I mean, we can't be making exceptions because you're feeling sentimental. If it's not logically consistent, then it's not really much of a principle at all. It's just a whimsical policy based on your feelings. I am curious though, like, Disney's remaking a lot of these old movies now. Mulan's just coming out this weekend, I guess. How would they approach that if they were to redo this Robin Hood version today? Do you think they'd be as forthright, or more forthright perhaps, in their intention to promote socialism, to put forth the idea that it's okay to rob people as long as they're rich and they can afford it. Because I'm telling you, I really can't get on board with that. I mean, in this case, this movie focused on a rich guy who was a thief. But most rich people do not have the ability to behave like Prince John. We don't have the ability to tax people. We don't have the authority. We don't have the power to run around taxing people. That's not how we make money. We make money, most of us, legitimately. The only legitimate way to make money is by providing goods and services to a marketplace that wants them. You know, we make stuff. We do stuff for you because you want it. That's a good thing. And when you rob those people that provide these things that you want, guess what happens? You don't get those things no more because they're broke and they go out of business. So I tend to be very sympathetic to, you know, who Robin Hood's victims would mostly be. They wouldn't normally be Prince John. That was just the target in this one particular story. But the rest of the time, I mean, how many Prince Johns are there out there? Not very many, right? So generally he would be robbing from productive members of society. And that just hurts the community. That's probably why this town is broke in the first place. It's probably not just because of taxes. But anyway. There's a lot of different versions of this story. It was a folk hero generated to suit different political climates at the time. You know, Hood, his last name was an occupational name, like Cooper, Miller, Smith. You know, it's somebody who makes hoods. And Robin was a very common name back then. Hood was a common profession. Robin Hood was a very common name. So the idea that it's this one very specific person that really lived and really did these things, I think should be set aside. I don't think there's much chance of that being the case. This is a concept. This is an idea that's been fashioned, and different people have tried to sell it to the public many times over and over and over again throughout history, and they're still doing it now. So I'm interested to see how Disney would handle it if they were to do it again. Would they be more comfortable just openly pushing socialism? I wonder, because we've got Bernie Sanders being pretty bold about it right now in the Democratic primaries, but I guess time will tell. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Like, subscribe, and come on back for the next one.